Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting of the Liverpool City Council's Constitutional Issues Committee. I just now pass over to the Chair, Councillor Ruth Bennett, who will now introduce proceedings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I welcome members, officers and members of the public viewing proceedings online to today's meeting. I will now ask the committee clerk, Mike Jones, to check that members and officers present virtually can see and hear us.
Thank you, Chair. Dealing firstly with the virtual meeting hub, obviously we can see and hear yourself, Ruth, so welcome. If I could ask my colleague to just pan round now. And we have, I believe, Councillor Radford. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, smashing.
Excellent, thank you. That's perfect. We now have, I believe, Councillor Hanson. Welcome, can you hear us okay?
I can, yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Moving on to the tiles visible on screens. Councillor Makinson, welcome.
Okay.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor McLinden, welcome. Can you hear us okay?
I can, Mike, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Robinson, welcome. Can you hear us okay?
Good morning, loud and clear. Thanks, Mike.
Perfect. Councillor O'Byrne, welcome. Can you hear us okay?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Councillor Qadir, can you hear us okay?
I can see and hear. Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Roberts, can you hear us okay?
I can see and hear everyone clearly.
Perfect. Councillor Jennnings, can you hear us okay? That's perfect. Councillor Rasmussen, if you could unmute your mic, confirm you can hear us okay?
I can hear and see you perfectly.
That's perfect. Councillor Roberts, dealt with you, and I believe Mayor Anderson has joined us as well today. Can you hear us okay? If you can hear us, can you just unmute your mic, please? Thank you. Okay, Chair, I confirm that members present as required for us, and in addition, the live feed is actually
The live feed. Okay. I'd also remind members and officers to leave your microphones on mute during the meeting until you wish to comment. In addition, can officers also turn off their webcams unless you are addressing the committee? Once a member has spoken, please ensure to mute your mic again so the audio remains clear. When members or officers do wish to speak, you can either use the hand up feature or by attracting my attention on the screen. When I do bring you in, please unmute your mic and say your name and allow a brief pause while we ensure you are visible on screen. Once you have spoken, please make sure also to lower your hand. So go to the first item on the agenda, which is the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, I can't see anybody indicating, so we move on to item number 2, which is minutes of the last meeting. Can I refer members to the minutes of our last meeting as held on the 6th of January 2020? Are the minutes agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, conduct of virtual meeting procedural rules. Can I refer members to pages 4 to 21 of the agenda, which sets out the draft conduct of virtual meeting procedural rules. Chris or Mike, would you like to introduce the report for us, please?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hope so. Just to say, obviously, we've been operating these meetings now for near on 4.5 months. We've had roughly 50 publicly streamed meetings. We've only had at the very beginning a bit of a bumpy ride with planning and one other with cabinet. So we've had 98% success with these procedural rules. We also had a chairs meeting last night, which worked quite well. The select committee chairs, and they fed into any comments on that. There's just a couple of things which Ruth will refer to. They want firming up in the procedural rules, but those that have been applied seem to work well, and we've got into a bit of a rhythm with these meetings. So the procedural rules are there for comments. They've been to the chairs group, and also obviously they're going to council next week. So if any members have got any queries, please just raise them. Thank you.
Chris, last night we had our meeting of our select committee chairs to review our virtual meetings to date. Over 50 meetings have been held so far, and with all having been completed successfully. And whilst we have some technical issues, we have been able to largely resolve these and continue. At the last night's discussion, the chairs raised a number of points, which I'll ask Chris and Mike to comment on now too.
Again, if Mike wants to come, there's just two main bits, just to clarify exactly what we mean by public question time at select committees now that operates, and also to be clear when we say meetings have to be stopped or closed down, what threshold has to be met, and just so the other members on this meeting are aware of it. Basically, if the live stream goes down and the public can't see the meeting, we'll adjourn it for say 15 minutes and try to get it back. We do need to go back to where the live stream stopped, but we can't get it back on. We have to stop the meeting, and obviously members will be aware of this. If we get to a stage where we're in quorum, because members can't get onto the meeting, we'd then have to stop the meeting as well. But again, just to highlight, obviously some of this is dependent on the technical abilities in members' homes and the Wi-Fi. If a member's goes down during a meeting and can't get on, that won't stop the meeting. The only difference to that other provision is where you've got the likes of planning. If a member hasn't heard the whole of the information about that item, obviously they can't contribute in the decision, and that's in the procedural rules. So just the clarification points are what they call in court situations, and also closure of meetings. So we'll just firm that up. That's what the chairs asked us last night. Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Chris. Just to pick up as well, in addition to what Chris has said, the procedural rules, as members will be familiar with, have evolved over the last 4-month period and will continue to do so. So if in the event of any issues or improvements, members continue to identify if these can be fed directly through group leaders and whips, and obviously the rules continue to evolve to make them as appropriate as possible for conduct of our meetings.
Would any members like to comment or raise any issues? Okay, I can see Liam wishes to make a comment. Liam?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. First and foremost, I think these are a really good sort of procedures, if you like, in very sort of difficult circumstances. So I pay tribute to the officers for pulling them together. There's only really sort of two things I wanted to ask. First and foremost, have we done a kind of audit, if you like, of all members of the council to make sure they're conversant with the technology and make sure that everyone kind of knows how they can be involved and no one's then sort of not able to participate in meetings? Because I'm fully aware that sort of different members have got different levels of IT capability, and notwithstanding the points that sort of Chris raised about different people's IT connections at home, you know, broadband strength and things like that. So have we actually kind of done that one-to-one check of every member of the council to make sure kind of no one's disadvantaged? The second question I wanted to ask as well, slightly more techie if you like, is just about the chat function on Teams. Will we be using that within the City Council, and if so, is it visible to the public? The reason I ask that is that the different statutory bodies I'm also involved in, like the Combined Authority or Transport for the North, do have slightly different processes and procedures around that. So just want to sort of check so we know where we stand on that as well.
So, Mike, do you want to come in on that point before I bring anyone else in?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and pick up on those points as best as I can. In terms of the various equipment available to members, as you'll be familiar with, going back a number of years, the City Council introduced a range of tablet devices to support members with remote access to meetings. So at the moment we have a mixed landscape, as I'll call it, whereby probably 65 to 70% of members have chosen to take forward one of our tablets and can access meetings using a tablet. Remaining members obviously have your own personal equipment, and indeed anyone with a tablet can still use their own device to access our meetings successfully. As we've progressed through restarting the decision-making committees and select committee structures, you'll have seen there have been a number of practice sessions supporting each of the select committees on a rolling basis prior to each event taking place. That's been designed to familiarise members with Teams as the preferred platform, which we have discussed previously, the reasons for that being one of security and the level of encryption for the data feeds. We're conscious that in terms of members' experience, you've seen and have been able to use over various forums, Zoom, Teams and Skype. Now, Our meetings at present are facilitated through Teams for the simple reason of the security and consistency of platform, which is why we use the same platform for each meeting. In terms of the individual access needs for members, we're very much following up with individual members at the moment to see if there's any practical issues with equipment or any additional skills support that we can offer members. We're conscious in the coming weeks that we're likely to be hosting a full council meeting, so there's additional measures going to be done to ensure that every single member is contacted and you can ensure that they connect successfully to our systems. So there's quite a lot of work ongoing, and we'd strongly encourage members, if there's any issues or problems with access or with the quality of access once you're in, please to contact either myself or IT if required, and I'll arrange for people to contact you and resolve those issues as a matter of urgency, most certainly. Turn to the second issue in terms of the chat function and its enabling in terms of the conduct of meetings. That will need to be a matter for discussion between yourselves as members in terms as to whether or not there's a desire to use the function. Obviously, it can be potentially distracting to the conduct of a meeting, and obviously people may be less circumspect in terms of using certain chat facilities, so we're mindful of that. So that's a secondary issue to discuss. We are similarly conscious that the availability of the chat function can vary depending on how you're accessing a Teams meeting. For example, a number of members here today are accessing using council equipment and devices. A number of members are joining in the virtual meeting hub, and a number are using their own personal equipment. What that essentially means is that the chat function at present will be confined to those members accessing fully through Teams on a council device. So you therefore end up with an incomplete picture and exchange between members. Therefore, for purposes of completeness and for anyone listening to proceedings and anyone with visual difficulties, it would seem pragmatic at the moment to stick solely to speaking and raising matters during proceedings with the agreement of a chair. Thank you.
We've got Councillor Sarah Jennnings next.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, in terms of the quoracy for the full council meeting, and it says, I think it was 23 was the number in the document. That doesn't feel very many, and I'm wondering how did that number come about? How did we kind of land on 23? And also, is there, for the virtual meeting hub, would that be the same for the full council meeting, the St Mary's room, or would the council chamber ever be in use again? And if so, what kind of numbers could we accommodate in there if people have tech problems and if people would prefer to actually be in the meeting? That's it. Thanks.
Ruth, the quorum of 23 was done, it must be about 20 years ago now, so it was a quarter or so of the council. I was just a number chosen in reality going back, which was seen as a fair number to get in a physical council meeting at the time, to show that a council resolution had been passed by a lot, at least a good measure of members present. So, and I know a number of authorities have reduced the quorum for virtual council meetings. Other select committees have met in the hub we've got in the council chamber. I think, we've got like new web cameras set up there. It looks the part and sounds the part. You can physically get in the room COVID compliantly. That's with the regular spaces, and the movements is just one way in and one way round. I think it's 23 individuals. So for a council meeting, if you take the support staff and those technical staff would need for the meeting, you're probably looking at between 17 and 18 members you could get in the room. That's all depends on how you want to arrange the council meeting. The litmus test for the virtual meeting will be the council meeting on the 30th. It's quite a heavy agenda. So we'll have to have discussions. The leaders, we've already had discussions with leaders about the arrangements for the council meeting itself and the framework, the timings, etc. And that's for discussion over the next week. But the virtual setup in the council chamber is roughly around 23. But, the quorum has come up a number of years ago. I don't think it was an exact science, Sarah. It was just felt like, a quarter of the membership. Maybe it's something we revisit at the council in a week or so's time. But don't forget, if you're on the system, it's still quoted, even though you're not physically in a room. I hope that answers the question.
It did. I had one more question, if I may. It was just the standing orders, the structure of the council meeting isn't changing either, is it? That would be similar to what we've done in the past. So mayoral announcements, motions, any, documents to be...
The agendas, you'll recognise the agenda when it goes out on Tuesday as sort of the normal type of agenda we have for a council meeting. It looks the same. The issue we have here, and I don't know how many members are on planning who are on this meeting. If the meeting goes into 3.5, 4 hours, whatever that length of time, it's very, very tiring. We've got a situation where planning members have mentioned, the planning committee's lasting up to 4 hours. It's tiring for those members. You're looking at the screen intensely for that period. We're just out in discussion with the mayor and other leaders about how can we structure the council meeting for best effects for contributions, but also the time period we have, because it takes longer. Michael's just took, it was only five or so minutes to introduce whatever's roughly about a dozen members. Introducing 90 members on the 30th will take between 15 and 20 minutes because it just takes that length of time. So we're going to have to rehearse that, and also the way we're conducting votes at the moment is by exception, which is a quick process. But again, if you get to a council meeting further down the line where you're voting on the budget, the law dictates you have to have a card vote, but that means every member has to be brought in and out. But again, we're going to explore technology to see if we can do that a different way. We're learning as we go, but just to rehearse, our members played a part in this because these aren't easy meetings to chair and run. We've done a decent job so far. Touch wood. It's gone well, and we're learning as we go along. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Radford next.
Least technically savvy council members, and I think the reality is everybody's got their own learning mechanism and their own skills level. The fact is, when we've asked for support, we've got it. I've had a few meetings when my phone's dropped out, the IT, but it's not the end of the world. And I think we just have to be honest with ourselves. It's a totally new environment, and I would hate to be member services trying to run meetings by IT as we are. The question I'd like to really put a thanks down and say, yeah, Liam, I thank you for your question. I'm probably one of the people who do struggle the most, but it's also about people who have the responsibility to say, well, I'll go try and learn and access. I think having the hub in the council chamber here is a lot easier and a lot easier to plug into. And I think that's something we need to keep. And I'm begging the question, if the lockdown regulations come in, will it affect any of the current practices like the committee room here or members accessing the town hall? Because that could change the game plan again.
It's a good point. We'll have to see what comes out today and review it. But as I've said, like you're sitting in the room there, Steve, those tables are COVID compliant. I think you can only get 5 or 6 people in that quite large room. And you know how expansive the chamber is. And one of the benefits of the chamber, even though it's like a very old room, you can do it compliantly and it looks visually. I don't know if anyone's seen the select committees. There's a fair amount of space between everybody. Sanitisers coming in and out, one-way traffic. We do by the rules and the guidance. So I'm not envisaging the town hall to be a problem, but we'll just have to see what the guidance comes out today or any other measures that need to be put in place. And we'll inform members accordingly. We are where we are and we're learning as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Makinson.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of members have commented on the less reliable audio quality we've had with Teams compared to Zoom in other authorities. It gets worse the more people are actually in the meeting, I've found. Are we confident that it will be able to cope with a full council meeting? And has any other authority used Teams for such a large meeting?
Chris or Mike?
Thank you, Andrew. it's a legitimate point which you're raising in terms of the issues which members have no doubt all seen at different occasions in terms of audio or visual quality declining depending on the numbers of members present, or indeed the actual quality of the data feeds from individual members. We are taking a number of steps to try and ensure the quality is retained as much as possible. For example, as you've seen, we encourage members and we require officers to keep your microphones on mute when you're not talking, which means there's only a single feed going across the transmission, which ensures clarity and audibility for those of you present at the meeting virtually, and indeed for anyone viewing the live stream externally. A number of other authorities, as you alluded to, have held various types of meetings, not dissimilar to what we've been doing ourselves, and there are a mix of different platforms being used. Anecdotally, some authorities have indeed used other platforms such as Zoom, and whilst on occasion they have had better audio quality, they've then had issues with the actual video feed being overtaken through third-party intervention, which has resulted in reputational harm to the organisations concerned. And indeed, we are conscious of that as a City Council to reflect appropriately and ensure it's a positive reflection on the reputation of the City Council as a whole and indeed the wider city. In terms of going forward, what we do try to do, we're working to ensure that the actual IT connections from the Town Hall, where we will be hosting full council, will have the widest possible bandwidth available. So the signal stream coming in and then subsequently being live streamed is at the maximum possible capacity. But again, we'll be strongly encouraging members, when you do access the meetings themselves, again to follow good practice in terms of keeping your microphones off. And obviously, if there are any issues with audio quality, to please let us know. In addition, it's a useful point to raise with members. The majority of you present are not using headsets for convenience, which is a matter of personal choice. But on occasion, the audio quality can deteriorate if it's not being fed directly from a microphone, from a headset. So we can make those available to you if necessary to help improve the quality and pickup. And that also should filter out some of any background noise as well. Thank you.
Is there any other members that would like to comment or raise any issues? No. Okay. Can I move that the procedures be submitted to Council for approval? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Move on to item number 4, which is dispensation of application of the 6-month rule. Can I refer members to pages 22 to 25 of the agenda to a report recommending that the absence of any elected members from council and committee meetings be authorised and approved for the period up to and including the 26th of May 2021 in accordance with the provisions of section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. Chris or Mike, could you introduce the report, please?
It's just to say a lot of authorities that have had council meetings during the period, this is one of the reports that has been on their agenda. It's just a safeguard for members. We haven't got as many meetings as we used to have, even virtually. And, you know, we've all met the 6-month rule to date, which is a tribute to all members across the piece. But we think this is an extra safeguard just in case members fall foul of it. And we're not out to kilter them with other cities in terms of putting this resolution to council. That's just a safeguard for the members, because the issue you've got in terms of legislation, again, for those members that aren't aware, if you don't attend a meeting within 6 months, the law states, without this provision being agreed by council, it's an automatic disqualification. So we don't want to be in that territory. It's just an extra safeguard for the members concerned. So, as I say, it's what other authorities have agreed to date. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Radford indicating to speak, so can you indicate if you have any other questions, and we'll go to Steve.
Going to be absolutely honest, I mean, committee member services have kindly prompted councillors about the 6-month rule. We have the provision for people to come in the town hall if they're not IT savvy. Why do we need to waive the rule? I have to say, I think it's an incredibly lenient rule that we allow people to be missing from any public duty or public function for 6 months and still get paid. I mean, so I don't understand why they need to vary it. We've got all the provisions in place to support members contributing to meetings virtually. So I don't feel comfortable with it. I mean, I'm going to be honest, we've had some appalling cases of councillors being missing from public duties and living out of the city, not in the last decade, but in previous decades, where the 6-month rule has been they just flew back or got a train back for once every 6 months. So I don't see why we need to vary the rule. I think the rule is actually incredibly lax. It needs toughening up, not loosening.
Thanks, Steve. Do we have any other members have any questions or comment? I can see Councillor Natalie Nicholas.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to find out if members' health, if they had like health condition, if that takes into consideration with the 6-month rule.
Yeah, can I answer that, Ruth? Is that okay? That's what I was just going to, as a response to Steve. The issue you've got, Steve, this isn't about public duties, this is about meetings. We're not saying members aren't doing anything for 6 months. This is just about attending meetings, which is what the regulation relates to. And then the other one is if and as Natalie's just said, if a member was, say, unfortunately ill, say with COVID, you have to put a resolution to council to allow the extension. Well, we haven't got that many council meetings. So you'd be in a situation where we'd be in a bit of a panic as an authority to get approval because technically the law states X. So that's what the safeguard's for. So, what Councillor Nicholas has just said is spot on. It's a safeguard for them type of scenarios.
Councillor Mary Rasmussen next, and then Councillor Radford wants to come in on that point. So, Mary.
Hi, Chair. Just a quick point, really. I mean, I don't know whether other members feel that virtual meetings can be quite intrusive on the home life. If you've got family around you, especially children. But making this rule a little bit more lax can also help in times of bereavements, where if you're recently bereaved, you may not feel that you can attend a meeting. But where the meeting is held in your own home, that could be far more difficult. Just something for members to think about.
And Councillor Radford next.
But I've always thought we had a provision under the regulations for someone was sick that an application can be made for them to be. But also, in the reality, if someone is sick, and you used the example of if they had COVID, well, COVID doesn't last for more than 3 weeks at a stretch, and it does leave the person exhausted. But that didn't stop them plugging in on the internet. So the current provision of internet tapping into meetings is actually more flexible because if we had Richard Pine on the council living in St Albans, he could plug in from St Albans, to use an example historically, even though he wasn't in the city. So I would have thought with the internet provision, it's more flexible for people who've got sickness or work duties out of town than the current proviso. So I don't understand why we need to flex it. Actually, the IT provision is more flexible than the previous regulations where we had to physically attend.
Thanks. I'll bring Councillor Natalie Nicholas again and then to Chris or Mike for a response. Mute, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Just to touch on what Councillor Radford has shared, in terms of COVID was an example used by Chris, but it's not exclusively COVID. And just for clarification, someone can be hospitalized with COVID for up to 3 months, depending how bad it is. But looking at the wider, some people have cancer, and while, yes, they might be at home, they might be on chemo medication, and they might not be up to it. But obviously, this change is long-term, so we're not just going to make it short-sightedly, and that's why in terms of it's very good to take into consideration different aspects, but at the same time, being cognitive that, people might have varying health conditions as well.
In the office, Chris or Mike for comment, and then Councillor Hanson wishes to speak.
If I can say, Steve, that this is a very unique set of circumstances we've got. worldwide. And actually, as officers, we think sometimes members, and even our experience in the last 6 months, have very legitimate reasons why they can't attend meetings. And what we don't want is to be unfair to those members because we can't get a meeting set up or we haven't got a meeting set up. So it's just having that safeguard or safety net for those type of members. So the point you just made before, Steve, actually just to say isn't correct. We don't have a regulation that says we've got a safeguard for people that are ill. The safeguard is you have to get a resolution from the council to extend their period. So what this is giving a blanket one across the piece for those type of scenarios. The chief executive or the mayor hasn't got authority to extend that rule. It's a council decision, hence why we just need this extra provision. Thank you.
Hanson. That's me, go on.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is absolutely right. I know one councillor, and given that we're meeting infrequently anyway, sat down with their select committee on the home computer, and the Wi-Fi had gone down. As a consequence, she couldn't join the meeting. Now, she's got childcare, so she can't drop her name onto the town. And that's the kind of thing that if we don't do something, such as what Chris and the officer suggested, you could have people just fall and foul because of a simple IT issue that they've got no control over. For me, I think the report makes sense. I think it safeguards all the councils within the city. I don't think I'm unaware of anybody who deliberately prolongs missing meetings to end up with that 6 months who come in, unless there's unsafe statements. And Steve, just on the point of COVID, I know people who got COVID 4 months ago and still not well. They go from day to day, one day they're fairly good, the next day they're back to nearly dying. So, you know, it's COVID, in lots of cases you're over in 3 weeks, but in lots of cases you're not over in 3 weeks. Okay, fine. Thank you. Yeah, fine.
Is there any other members that have any other questions? No? Okay. Can I move that the report and recommendation be submitted to full council on the 30th of September and recommended for approval? Is that agreed?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Moving on to item number 5, which is select committee terms of reference. Can I refer members to page 26 of the agenda and page 1 of the supplementary agenda, setting out proposed changes to the terms of reference of Employment and Skills Select Committee and the Culture and Tourism Select Committee. Do members have any questions? No, I can't see anybody indicating that they wish to speak, so can I move that the terms of reference be submitted to full council on the 30th of September for approval? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, which is other constitutional issues. Can I refer members to pages 2 to 28 of the supplementary agenda? First item A, consultation responses to proposed revisions to licensing policy statement. This report details the proposed revisions regarding disability access and knife crime to the Council's licensing policy statement produced following a statutory consultation process. This set out a series of revisions as set out in appendices 1 and 2 to the report, proposed to be incorporated with immediate effect into the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy 2016 to 21, as agreed by the Licensing and Gambling Committee of the 10th of March 2020. Anne-Marie Moran from Licensing is present if members have any questions. Anne-Marie, would you like to say a few words first?
Well, the background, as laid out in the report, is that we were approached and requested to do a consultation with regard to disability access at licensed premises. This consultation was carried out, and then also again after the killing of Sam Cooke back in the Empire nightclub some time ago, and the judge's recommendations, we were also asked to carry out a consultation with regard to knife crime there. The consultations have been carried out, and as a result, those amendments, we request that go into the licensing policy.
Do members members have any questions? No. No, I can't see anybody indicating that they wish to speak, so can I move that the report and recommendation be submitted to full council on the 30th of September and be recommended for approval? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you. Item B, which is street letter protocol. This item is included for discussion following a request from Councillor Ann O'Byrne. The protocol, which covers street letters, is included in the supplementary agenda for information purposes only. Anne, would you like to comment? I can't hear you. You may be on mute because I can't see. Okay, that's it. We can see and hear you. Hopefully.
Thank you. Well into me routine then. Sorry about that. I was just saying about the use of street letters by us as ward councillors has now become more important than ever, given that that's a really clear way that we're communicating what we're doing in our wards and how we're supporting residents, especially those that are still self-isolating. My concern is that the limit of 300 is actually causing issues given the way that we communicate. And I understand why this was brought in. It was because some people were abusing the street letter system. So instead of dealing with those individuals, we've actually introduced a system that can actually stop us communicating in the most effective way. I've raised this several times with committee services, and so that's why it's been put on the constitutional issues. When it was originally brought in, we were discussing about how each councillor sort of had a set amount of money allocated to them for their street letters. And that's how it got sort of broken down into this 300. If I needed to communicate with everybody in my ward over one issue, and that used up all of my street letters for the year, then as a ward councillor, if I choose to do that, then what's the issue with me doing that? If I understand that this means that all of my money for that 1 year has been used up in exactly the same way that the mayor wrote to every resident in the city to explain what was going on with COVID. It was a really important letter that needed to be sent, communicate what the local authority was doing. If other councillors choose to send 10 letters every day to different people across the ward, that's entirely up to them. I just think that we need to find a way that enables us to do our job in the most effective way that we can. And the provision of just 300 without seeking permission from committee services just seems to inhibit the work that we do. And I think that maybe, you know, if a group of us could get together and look at how we stop it being abused, but at the same time enable councillors to do their job in the most effective way, then that would be a good way of us moving forward with street letters. I've found them invaluable over this few months to be able to communicate with people, as I say, especially those that are on their own, and the amount of casework that's produced where people have contacted quite often just because they need somebody to chat to has been invaluable in making contact with people. So I'm asking that we look at this and then come back to constitutional issues with a recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Before I bring in other members, can I just invite the officers to respond and confirm the arrangement for street letters, including during lockdown?
Thanks Ruth, thanks Anne. I think, yeah, let's get an option paper together about street letters. But in terms of during the last period, obviously it's been very flexible. I'll say honestly, I've never ever refused an extension over 300 in the 20 years I've had the job, because members put the business case to us to say, look, this is the reasons why, and we can then justify it when somebody asks. Just anecdotally, in terms of print run in the last 4 street letters in the last period, I think it's nearly trebled, because obviously members have to get the street letters out. So it could be further down the line, we just review the allocation to individual members and how they want to do it. Anne's mentioned that in the past. But, you know, I'm quite happy to go forward with that. The only other arrangements, and this is a circular one for me, is that we have an approval process. So yeah, all members know these. So it's not politically overt, because we then get complaints. So there's an approval process to come to me and Michael. But where members want to exceed the 300, especially in the current climate, it's quite flexible. But let's do a note back. I'll do a report, and you mightn't have to wait for a further meeting of constitutional issues. Let's just circulate it and see if the protocol can be agreed in some way, and maybe we get authority from the council to do that, like a provision to say once it's gone round to this group, we can amend what the arrangements are. If members are happy with that by group or something like that. That makes sense, Chair. Thanks.
Chris, I've got Councillor Radford indicating that he wishes to speak, so if any other members wish to speak, can you raise your hand, please? Councillor Radford.
Just being quite candid, our ward, because it's got a lot of high deprivation areas and different issues, we've probably used the street letter system more than most. We've also, apart from a unique estate of difficult to access flats, we've also helped the council by ensuring we hand deliver the street letters to reduce the expense on the council. And I think that's entirely right. If we candid, because we've been unable to roll out the skip system as frequently as we did pre-COVID, we've probably used the system less. But I think I can only think of one time I've ever had to ask Chris and his team to allow us to go over the 300 rule, and that was when we had a particular campaign in conjunction with the police and the hate crime unit of the council to target areas of hate crime, and we had a reply from Chris's team within 1 hour 27 minutes to say the case was made for going over the 300 limit. So if I be candid, my conclusion is, if we haven't had a refusal and we haven't had a councillor complaining they've had to wait for an excessive delay, why do we have to reinvent the wheel that's working well?
Okay, thanks. Is there any other members wishing to comment? Okay, noting all the comments made. Sorry, Richard. Councillor McLinden, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Just on Steve's last point about us hand delivering stuff, that's fine in a ward where you've got 2 or 3 members who are physically able. At the moment, Anne's working on her own. I'm physically disabled. I can only deliver a handful of letters, basically. Because of my walking impairment. Cheryl is on maternity leave. That leaves Anne. So Anne's doing everything at the moment, and it's just not fair to expect her to go around hand delivering thousands of letters, basically. And we do a lot of letters, as Chris will clarify. That's all I wanted to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else wish to speak? No. Okay. Noting all the comments made today and the reason for the scheme, I suggest we continue to monitor arrangements for the street letters during the coming month. In the event of any specific issues, either for approval for printing or postage, that this be reported to the Chief Whip and leader of the relevant group and addressed at our next meeting. Is that agreed?
Why don't we suggest to go to the group whips, because it's across, surely we go just to Democratic Services, wouldn't it? Well, I don't understand why I need to go back to Chief Whip.
Or the Chief Whip or the lead, well, we can have or the leader of the relevant group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Surely it should go to the head of Democratic Services or the Chief Executive Review. It should be someone impartial, not just...
Yeah, okay, so we could have a head of Democratic Services, Chief Whip and leader of the relevant groups, so that we can then raise it at this... Okay,
yeah, that seems right. I just think we've got to include the officers for their input.
Yeah, I think if we're bringing it back to this meeting, then it's for each, so a leader of the group can feed it in and all the relevant members can feed it back.
That's fine.
Okay, so if we add it to that this be reported to the head of Democratic Services, Chief Whip and leader of the relevant groups, and addressed at our next meeting, is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item C, which is Members Allowances Scheme 2020 to 21. As members will be aware, all of our existing structures and arrangements rolled forward in the absence of an AGM as allowed by the emergency legislation for COVID. This has included the existing allowances scheme rolling forward. Can I bring in Chris at this stage to comment? However, I will be suggesting that this scheme be submitted to full council on the 30th of September. Chris?
Thanks, Chair. As Ruth just outlined, obviously we've rolled forward with the scheme of delegation, the appointments processes, etc. But there's an issue in terms of the allowances we've rolled forward, obviously with the current scheme as is. But I need to ask the panel, the independent panel members, about any recommendations they would have this year in terms of uplift or anything else. So what I'm suggesting to the committee, if you put the allowances scheme on the agenda for the 30th, I'll report before then to members of the council and the group of what they've recommended. So it's simply a matter of a procedural matter to get the allowances onto that agenda. All the other items we usually have for the AGM have just rolled forward, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Radford indicating that he wishes to speak. So if any members or have any questions or comments, can you raise your hands? Councillor Radford.
I know I've had particular anxieties about the imbalance between chairs' allowances and ward members' allowances. So I'll just put that on record. However, the one thing I think is distinctive this year is I'm wondering if we will take account of the fact that because of COVID, the amount of telephone, internet charges and usage councillors have will be reflected in the review. Because I think whereas we've traditionally done 3 advice centres a week and had access with residents in that way, I don't think that in the current COVID scenario, I think there will be a lot of councillors across the board who will have a lot more expense on telephone charges and telephone communication because we can't have one-to-one connection. And I'm wondering when the review takes place, if there's some recognising of that across the board.
Thank you. Chris or Mike, do you want to come in on that?
Just to say, we'll speak to the independent chair and the panel members. Steve makes a valid point. Just to note, though, the basic allowance covers stuff around telephone charges, but the internet usage, etc. It'll be a general review. It's not, obviously, I'm only going to speak to them next week. The agenda goes out next week. It's not going to be a wholesale review, but there may be comments around, the uplift, which I'll speak to the chairs about. But it is a valid point, during the COVID period, the amount of work members have had to do, and I'll reflect that maybe in a note that we circulate as part of the paperwork for council to leaders and other members of what the view of the panel members has been. I can do that quite easily. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment or ask a question? Okay, can I move that the scheme of allowances be submitted to full council on the 30th of September 2020? Is that agreed? Okay, lovely. Can I just thank, that's the end of the agenda, so can I just thank all members, officers and those viewing the live stream for participating in the meeting.
Chair, I did actually request, my group's got grave concerns about the increasingly we're being told by officers in different scenarios we haven't been consulted because it's gone to a cabinet member who's made a decision on how the consultation of ward councils goes. So I'm just putting a marker down without going into an individual instance. Our group are feeling incredibly antagonised that council officers are abrogating their duty to consult with ward members to the whims of cabinet members. And I just want that to be known. It's undermining the ethos of this council.
Okay, I think that's probably something you need to bring up with Chris, sort of.
No, it's not to raise it with respect to Chris or any one particular officer. I'm raising it with council because it's actually councillors in the driving seat who seem to think that's the way it's done, and it's influencing council officers who would have otherwise consulted board members not to do so. I'm not naming names in this case, but I'm quite happy to. I'm absolutely, the Liberal Party group is at the end of the tethers that the council has had needless expense, needless aggravation, needless procrastination, because council officers are being led to the view that they are the whim of the council congestion member, whether they consult ward members or not. And it's not on. It's not the ethos of the constitution, and it's not what's in the constitution. There's no point having protocols if we don't have the ethics to apply them.
Okay, Chris, do you want to comment on what Councillor Radford's raised?
Steve, as all members know, there's certain requirements in the member and officer protocol about consultation with ward members. I know the specific instance that Steve's talking about, because he has a fortnightly meeting, practically fortnightly anyway, with the mayor and the other members of the group, and he raised it then, and he's raised it directly with the chief executive. So I think what he's indicating, he just wants it noting here, because we've got no A or B on a committee, but we can put it in the minutes that it's also been raised at this meeting about ward consultation.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, again, can I thank everybody, members, officers and those viewing the live stream, for participating in the meeting and bringing the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, colleagues and those viewing the live stream. Just to confirm, that concludes today's proceedings, and the live stream will now cease.